Okay, guys, we are moving forward. I'm going to do a few scenes with you. The way I'm going to do these is a summary and giving you key lines and sometimes a soliloquy, something like that, all right? If you remember, the scene we looked at last was when Macbeth met with the murderers. The murderers are the two guys who's hiring to kill Banquo. He has this fear of Banquo because of Banquo's knowledge. And we talked about how he motivated them. He made them think that Banquo was their enemy. And so that's set. This next scene, which is 3-2, if you notice I'm going to use my moose pointer. It says Banquet Day, all right? And when he was meeting with the murderers, Lady Macbeth was not there. So this is just a short scene afterwards on the day of the banquet. And essentially, Lady Macbeth is like, what are you doing? What's going on? Why are you always staying by yourself? And he's like, don't worry about it. In fact, that's still a line that I put here. When she asks him what's to be done, he says, be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed. It's such a reversal of roles from the murder of Duncan when she planned everything and she basically said to him, leave it to me. And we talked about that was a reversal of gender roles. Well, now things are swinging back. This really means, like, don't worry your pretty little head about it. And so he doesn't really tell her, although she's kind of figuring it out because he keeps talking about Banquo. Okay, the next scene switches outside of the castle, and it's actually the scene of Banquo's murderer. What's key here is that there's a third murderer shows up, and the other two that Macbeth had spoke to are basically like, who are you? What's going on? And he's like, Macbeth told me to come here. And they literally say, he doesn't need to mistrust us. He told us what to do. And that's what it comes down to. Macbeth is getting paranoid. He trusts no one. He spoke for 2 days to these murderers. He hired them. He convinced them that Banquo was their enemy. And then when time came, he's like, yeah, I don't trust them. And he sent somebody else. The end result of the murder scene is, if you remember, Banquo is riding on an errand. He's with his son Fleance, whom also Macbeth wanted killed. And the outcome is that Banquo is killed, but Fleance, that's the son's name. This Fleance is Banquo's son. He escapes, all right? And it's a quick little scene outside, and the murders, when it's over, like, oh, the young one got away. We have to go tell Macbeth what's happened. And then we get to a longer scene here, 3-4. It's that night at the feast. And remember, Macbeth set this up so that he's at home with all a crowd around him, all his other things. And Macbeth's problem is that he's talking too much and he's so obvious. He keeps referring to Banquo. He's like, gee, where's Banquo? I wish Banquo was here. It's too bad Banquo's not here yet. All right? He talks too much. Okay. First part of the scene, the murderers come and he sees them kind of outside the room and he goes to the door and they tell him, Banquo's dead, but Fleance has escaped. And he was very happy to hear that Banquo is dead, and he gets very upset when he hears that Fleance escaped, but he calms himself by saying, you know what? He's young yet. He's really not a threat yet. There's time to get him. So at least, Banquo's dead, and they leave. And he goes back into the feast. The interesting thing about the feast is it's a big crowd. You got to picture these huge tables, crowds, and the king has this, has people seated all over, and he's standing there trying to be the host, giving a toast, and a couple of different people like, come and sit with us, come and sit with us, come and sit with us. And finally, it's raw, somebody said, come and sit right here, Your Majesty, sit with us. And Macbeth glances like, what are you talking about? The table's full. And he's looking like from the back, and he just sees that somebody's there. And he's like, no, right here. And so he walks over and he looks and he sees an image of Banquo all bloody. It's Banquo's ghost, which indicates that he's obviously feeling guilt and it's playing on him. And so I said, the murderers brought the empty chair. So he starts talking to the ghost. He's saying, what are you doing? Don't shake your gory locks at me. The ghost has his long ass full of blood and he's going like this. And Macbeth literally says, like, you can't say I did it. It's almost like you can't prove it was me. I've been here, okay? Obviously, the guests notice. And at first, one of them says, Ross says, gentlemen, rise. His Highness is not well. Rise as in we should probably go. And Lady Macbeth says this, sit, worthy friends. My lord is often thus, and hath been from his youth. Pray you keep seat. The fit is momentary. Upon a thought, he will again be well. If much you note him, you shall offend him and extend his passion. Feed and regard him not. And then she turns to Macbeth, is like, what's the matter with you? Are you a man? So she's trying to cover, and it's like, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. Just sit. If you ask him, if you make a big deal, you make it worse. He gets more upset. Then she's turning to Macbeth, and it's an aside. She's like, what are you doing? What's the matter? And he's telling her, don't you see it? What's going on? I can't believe you're not reacting. He obviously doesn't realize that he's the only one that sees the ghost. Okay? There's more of this exchange. The ghost gets up sometimes and leaves, and when the ghost is gone, Macbeth calms down, but it comes back again. It does this like 3 times. Finally, Macbeth says this, can such things be and overcome us like summer's cloud without your special wonder? You make me strange even to the disposition that I owe, when I think you can behold such sights and keep the natural ruby of your cheeks when mine is blanched with fear. He literally says to Lady Macbeth, you think I'm strange? How can you see that and not react? And what happens is Ross says, what sights, my lord? And that's when Lady Macbeth jumps in and says, I pray you, speak not. He grows worse and worse. Questions enrage him. At once, good night. Stand not upon the order of your going, but go at once. And so the lords, they all obey. They get up like, okay, and they march out. I always find it very interesting. In about 5 minutes, she went from, no, sit, stay, don't worry about it, it'll be fine, to quick, get out. And I was like, why? What happened? Well, what happened was one of the guests, Ross, asked him, what do you mean? What sights? What do you see? A direct question. And what Lady Macbeth was afraid he was going to answer and explain. What do you mean? Banquo's ghost, it's right there. So she throws them out. So then there's a quiet scene with just the 2 of them. And Macbeth says this. He notices something. See if you can tell what he notices. He says first, how sayest that Macduff denies this person at our great bidding? All of a sudden he's like, hey, wait a minute. Macduff wasn't here. How come Macduff wasn't here? If you remember, Macduff's the one who's suspicious of him, and he wants nothing to do with Macbeth. Lady Macbeth was like, did you send to him, sir? And Macbeth says, I hear it, by the way, but I will send. There's not a one of them in his house. I keep a servant feed. What he just said is, I'll find out what happened. I keep a paid spy in every one of my Thane's houses. That says so much. If you remember when I started this, the idea of a Thane in his kingdom is supposed to be this undying trust, and clearly there's none of that. Okay? Look at what else Macbeth says he's going to do. I will tomorrow, and betimes I will to the weird sisters, more shall they speak, for now I am bent to know by the worst means the worst. For my own good, all causes shall give way. I am in blood stepped in so far, that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go over. Strange things I have heard in the head to the hand, which must be acted ere they may be scanned. He's going to go see the witches again. He's like, they're going to tell me more. They got to explain. And he's like, I'm in so deep. It's almost like the analogy of crossing a deep river, and when you get to the middle, like, oh, this is really deep. It's like, you're halfway through. You might as well just keep going, because it's just as bad to get back. Okay? And Lady Macbeth, she says, you lack the season of all nature's sleep. She just keeps telling him all you need is some sleep. Okay? And that's the end of that scene. We're going to get to the witches again tomorrow.